Okay, this is a backup video in case the stream doesn't work, which I'll be setting up a camera for over here. Hopefully both will work. That would be nice. So, welcome to day 2 of Ancient and Medieval History. This is your first day present, though. So, obviously, this is going to be different from most years. Yesterday, I talked to most of you online. Get the door, please, in the corner. Thank you. About the course, if you finally saw things. Yes, you'll need a late pass. Do you have one?
No, I can find the building myself.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, it's my first day.
Okay, that's fine, but I already sent the attendance in. So if you want, you can drop your stuff off over there and then head to the office and get it. Well, no, it's day 1. Maybe I can do it. What's your name?
Talia.
Ah, okay. Last name?
Smith.
Okay. I'll try to work the attendance magic later. You can stay.
Thank you.
Normally, need the pass. Okay. So, did any of you have trouble seeing the YouTube video that I had to run in its place? What was the trouble? First you. Okay. That's weird.
I know. You want to switch to your home account?
Were you signed into your CDA Panthers? Okay.
You sign out of that.
Say it again.
If you sign out of that, then you can do it.
Oh, okay. So if you're on somebody else's account or you're not on your CDA Panthers, apparently you can see it. That's weird. There it is. So that's what you do to see that video. Same problem with you guys? Different problem. Yeah, that's because there were problems with the stream. What I did is I recorded a YouTube video for my period 6, and I posted that separately, not as a live stream, but on the classroom. So, if there are ever technical problems, go to the Google Classroom, and later that day I'll hopefully have something for you. This technology is delicate. It's like a bunch of Christmas ornaments. And if anything goes wrong, the entire system has weirdness. So you'll get to just see it when you can, okay? Any other questions about the technology? Yesterday's live streaming was truly a disaster for my ancient classes. But we got it fixed. Supposedly. Okay, I see no questions. What we covered yesterday, you should have something out to write on and something out to write with, please. What we covered yesterday was first of all, I don't like the fact that you have to wear masks. I don't believe in them. It doesn't make any sense to me. But if that's the price that I have to pay to have you here in person, which is a much better situation than online learning, then I guess it's a price I will reluctantly pay. I am sorry that you have to wear those uncomfortable things during my lectures, but that's the rule at this point. If that changes, very few people will be happier than I that you'll be able to reveal your true face to the world and breathe something other than the garlic you might have had yesterday for dinner. We also talked about how online learning is not the same. It's like watching a fireplace video on YouTube. You'll get some of the light and none of the heat. Being in person has a quality that you cannot reproduce, and I am primarily a performer who uses an audience and who prefers an audience. If you ever do acting, you know that you'll do a different job when there's an audience presence as opposed to if you're just being recorded on a camera. It's a different experience. So I'm glad you're here. I encourage you to have patience because none of your teachers have ever been through this before. Normally, what we can do, because of our experience, I've been teaching history for over 20 years, and my first time in a classroom was October of 1986 as a teacher. So normally, my experience can help me set things up so it's nice and convenient and easy for you. This year, we're all winging it. And what we're doing now is fundamentally different from what we did last spring. So if you were here for last spring, We had a totally online model. This is different from it. At first, your teachers may err on the side of giving you too much work. I've given you the full workload. If for some reason I become convinced that the full workload needs to be eased off a bit just because of the weirdness of this situation, I will change my requirements. Now, if you have opinions on this, you can come talk to me outside of class time, and as long as you're respectful, I'll listen and think about what you say. If you want to email me, you can do that too. But be respectful. I don't promise to agree with you, but I will think about what you say. And you might give me an idea that I hadn't had before. You might tell me information that I need to know. So it's important that if there's a problem, you let me know about it. Or if you have different ideas, be welcome to let me know about it. I'm not going to whack-a-mole you for that. I also talked about how the notes on the board are like a skeleton of a great animal. It gives the structure. But all of the living things, that's going to be given by my lectures. So you can follow the notes, but the truth is you're going to learn from the lectures. Don't be worried about writing notes in advance. That's why I give you the note packet, so that you'll have the structure written right there, so that you can write down whatever you need to in order to help you remember. That's why I insist that you have an open piece of paper or something to write on and something to write with whenever anyone is in front of the room. You owe it to yourself to do what you can to help yourself remember. See, this year the normal student-teacher give and take, which includes a certain degree of toleration for student reluctance, it's not going to work. We are partners or we're nothing. I can't teach you against your will in a hybrid model. In fact, I can't teach you against your will, period. You either have to be on board with this or you're in the wrong place. I will do what I can to make this work, to make this sane and reasonable, exciting and interesting. But it's your job to try your best to meet me halfway. And if you do that, this will work. If you don't do that, it won't. It's pure and simple. I talked also about how big space is and how long time is, and how in all that space and time you are unique. That means by laws of economics, you are valuable. But don't worry, everyone else is too. I talked about how our society, Western civilization, is unique in world history, in that we develop ideas of human rights and human freedom that allow us to have societies that are strongly enough governed to prevent crime from dominating our streets, but at the same time gives the maximum possible scope for individual choice and individual decision making. It's also important to understand Western civilization because everywhere on the earth has been affected by it. During the age of colonialism, the rest of the world largely was either European colonies, former European colonies like the United States, or under the influence of Europe indirectly. I talked about controversy. And I have and will say things that if you're a feminist, an environmentalist, a person who believes that there are more than two genders, or any of the number of other controversies that exist in the world today, will probably tweak you, trigger you, or set you off. Why? A, I'm evil. But B, on top of that, the things people faced in history are not fundamentally different from what we face now. And one of the ways of making history come alive and be exciting is to reveal this connection. Last time I talked about cavemen huddling around a fire, worrying about the awesome power of fire, the wonders that it gives to heal wounds, cook food, light the darkness, and warm the winter. But at the same time, fire can destroy. It's a hungry demon that if you give it an inch, it will surge out of control. Today, we do the same kind of talking about atomic and hydrogen bombs, nuclear power. On the one hand, the atom bomb allowed the Japanese a reason to surrender, saving their society from a mass suicide in defense of their god emperor. It shortened the war and saved more Japanese lives than anything in their history, at the expense of 2 city populations. It also prevented the fear of atomic warfare, a third world war. We've had a longer period of peace. That means no big wars, maybe some small and medium sized wars, but no big wars from 1945 until today. It's one of the longest periods of peace in human history. Relative peace. It's always relative. But on the other hand, we all know that atomic bombs can destroy human civilization. Hydrogen bombs can destroy all life on Earth, including viruses and crab roaches. Everything gone. The details of the weapons differ, but the fundamental problem, we have tools and we use tools that are awesome in their power. And if they get out of our control, we're toast. That's the same. So many of the problems that are faced by our ancestors are basically similar. They have connection to problems and controversies that we have today. So I'm going to bring that out. But when I talk from my conservative, and I'm a lousy Christian, but my limited Christian point of view, I am not doing so because I want you to knuckle under and be like me. No. I've been in that situation. It's obnoxious. I'm not going to do that to you. What I am doing is encouraging you to raise your hand and offer your opinion. Your opinion. Your opinion can absolutely disagree with mine. In fact, I suspect it does on many occasions. Only a very strange person would agree with me on everything. My wife doesn't agree with me on everything. She's a very special person in that she has chosen to put up with me for a very long time. None of you have done that, thank God. So what I expect is for you to tell me where I get my logic wrong, how I've reasoned it imperfectly. Maybe I don't consider a certain type of evidence. Maybe I'm just plain wrong, or maybe you agree. This only will work if we trust one another. This is not a place of cancel culture. It is not a place of political correctness. If you think something, you should feel free to express it. If it's a problem, I'll tell you, but it's probably not a problem. If you're straightforward, thoughtful, that's all I could ask. I'm not teaching you what to think. I'm teaching you how to think. And I'm teaching history that has an important role to play in your life. So, one of the other things I said was that if you have questions, since you can't ask them in real time when you're watching online, especially when you're watching a YouTube video hours after the lesson, to come in with any questions or comments. So based on what I have said thus far today or yesterday, do any of you have any questions or comments on any of the things I've said?
Using trees at a faster rate than we're growing.
Now that's the fault of tree growers. And the truth is, the profit motive will encourage people to grow trees and police their woodlands. But you're right. If your evidence is true, I actually would be surprised, but fine. Let's assume your evidence is true. Then somebody in the timber industry is doing something wrong. If you own a stand of land and you choose to use that land for timbering, it's only going to be harvested every 30 to 50 years. You are obliged to plant the right number of trees. Let me ask you, do you think that this could be the case? And by the way, when you're speaking, you can pull your mask down if you want, if and only if you want. Let's say you have an old growth or a naturally overgrown stand of trees. You have 20 acres. There, in that stand are going to be a lot of saplings that you're going to have to clear out because they're garbage trees. They're not worth anything in the market, or because they're just in the way. So maybe there are 250 really good trees on that stand, but you have to cut down 500 trees to get it. But the remaining 250 trees are little weedy in the way. You're not going to plant the weeds again. You're only going to plant the trees that you're growing as a cash crop. So you'll harvest more trees than you replant. Could it possibly be that, or could it be that we're just being unwise?
Unwise.
Okay, your opinion. Fair enough. Do you want to say one other thing? You got it. Last word.
So you said there's something special about writing long text. I have something to tell you. Schools are required to teach typing over a line.
Yeah, that's because schools are wrong.
But you work for a school.
But I'm right. Mac, if you haven't experienced this yet, and I'm sure you have, there are times when you look around the world and you wonder what the heck people are thinking. There are times when you're going to look at the world and you're going to say, oh, everyone else thinks they know what they're doing, but they're wrong. The thing about penmanship and the thing about writing longhand, that's one of the things that I disagree with most people in my profession about. And I disagree because I know that sooner or later the power is going out. And you don't want people who can't express themselves without a device. But yes, I am in the minority. Lots of smart people think that penmanship is outdated. You'll also note the type of clocks I have in here. What kind of clocks are they?
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Not digital. Because, in common parlance, at least for people older than you, we'll talk about something coming in at 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock is directly behind us. It's a way of talking. And if you don't know how to read a standard wall clock, you're going to be out of luck. But yeah, there are many of those anachronisms that you'll see in my work. Because I have this strange notion that about certain things the world is wrong and I'm right. It'll happen to you. It will happen to all of you. And good luck when that happens. Because then you've got a choice to make. Am I crazy or is the world crazy? Or maybe we can coexist. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts from last time? Okay, good. First new thing. Why study history? After all, in common parlance, history is another word for irrelevance. Oh, that's just history, as in that's a meaningless thing. Or, in the words of the wonderful deconstructive space opera that I loathe and despise, The Last Jedi, kill the past, kill the past, kill the past to make a greater future. Twonk, Kylo Ren. Anyway, people have tried this throughout history to make a better future by destroying the past. It's like self-inflicted amnesia. Oh yeah, if we don't learn about evil from the past, we're going to be better people in the future. Of the thousands of times that it has been tried to make a better future by forgetting the past, let me tell you how many times it's worked. Never. Never. And it hasn't worked because we're like a fly in amber. We're like fish in the water. We're like humans at the base of a sea of air. In fact, we are. We are in a context. This is best expressed by a Spanish philosopher named Jose Ortega-Y-Gasset. Oh, there was one other thing I said. I know it's a heck of a way to start high school in this weird circumstance. Keep trying. Don't let the fear stoke a fire in you that's going to destroy your joy here. Don't let the fear overwhelm you and force you out of here. I hope and I believe that all of you can stay and learn a lot and have a good experience. I'm going to try my best to make that happen. But you've got to be brave. You've got to be patient with the people around you as we figure out how to do all this stuff in this new way for the duration of this pandemic, which will end. The Spanish flu of 1919 was worse than this by far, and it passed. This too shall pass. So just I hope that you will have the right attitude and you will be courageous and that you will be willing to be patient. So the Spanish philosopher says you are yourself plus your circumstance. And what he means by that is, yeah, there's the you inside. The you that is either somebody who is quiet or extroverted. The you that likes to dance or likes to joke or likes to read and do math. There are people like that. You might like dogs or cats or slugs. Whatever that internal uniqueness that is you, that's you. But you don't exist out of context. You exist within a context of culture and history. If you took two genetically identical people, practically identical, you get you get identical twins from the same eggs. Egg splits, both halves of the eggs are fertilized. You now are part of an identical set of twins. And one of you is raised by a banker's family in Chicago, and the other one is raised by a family of Ndebele tribesmen in sub-Saharan Africa, Zimbabwe. It's going to be different by the time those two people are your age. Think about it. I mean, they're genetically identical. They're going to have a lot of the same interior qualities. They're certainly going to have a lot of the same physical attributes. They're going to look almost the same. What'll be different? Well, one of them will speak English. Actually, both of them will probably speak English because Zimbabwe used to be Rhodesia, a British colony, from the 1890s up through 1980. Well, one of them will also grow up learning the language of the Ndebele. They might learn the language of Shona, Mashona, which is the other great tribe in Zimbabwe, in fact, the majority tribe. They will have different educational experiences. If they even went to school in Zimbabwe, it would either be a mission school run by foreigners, which is unlikely, or a tribal school, where you learn those basic things, basic lessons that members of the tribe need to learn. And maybe girls would not be a part of it, hence, on the tribe. The person in Chicago would have a very similar experience to each of you. The person in Chicago would grow up with streets that have relative law and order in a society that values individual life and personal freedom. In Zimbabwe, a person your age would have been under a communist dictator named Robert Mugabe until about 2-3 years ago. That guy ruled from 1980 until, again, he was overthrown a couple of years ago by his own military backed by the Red Chinese. Mugabe's soldiers rode around the countryside stealing everything that wasn't tied down and stealing land when things that were on it that they liked were tied down. And nobody could stop them. So Mugabe's Zimbabwe was an anarchy and a totalitarian police state all at once. By your age, the person in Zimbabwe would certainly know people personally who were killed by government thugs. In Chicago, yeah, there'd be some crime, but if you're in a banker's family, you're going to probably be protected from a lot of that. Live in a nice neighborhood, nice community, protected by police, go to nice schools. Don't go to South Chicago, which is a bad neighborhood. So that's one example of the power of culture. Here's another. When we look at the world today, a lot of Americans tend to think that everyone around the world is just an American under the skin. Oh, they could wear furs or feathers, and they could have colors ranging from black as the ace of spades to pale pink, and everything in between. But they're basically like us. Well, that's true and false. What's true is that we all have a basic human nature that we share. That human nature doesn't change. We are people. We are scary, dangerous creatures with wonderful capacities and terrible capacities in us. But a lot of people look at the Islamic world, for example, and they say, oh, don't they feel ashamed at the way they treat the women's? Because in traditional Islamic society, there is no gender equality, nothing like it, nothing at all. Not in traditional Islamic society. The truth is that these traditional Muslims are not ashamed. They don't see a problem with it. They see a problem with us. Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, the Lord God Almighty, created men for certain purposes and women for other purposes. Those purposes are absolutely different. And to conflate the two, to confuse the two, to allow the two to venture into each other's realms is to pervert the word of God. They believe that. Why would a sane person allow things to develop in society that pervert the word of God? Let's talk about freedom itself. We believe that people should be allowed to believe whatever they want within very broad limits. And yet, they hate that about us. They view our freedom as a license for Shaitan, the great enemy, the adversary, or Satan. to enter into society to lead people away from God's truth. Why, if you are sane, would you willingly allow your society to be overthrown and infiltrated by evil? Why would you allow people to do evil in the name of freedom? Traditional Muslims throughout the Islamic world, which is huge, genuinely believe that they are absolutely right about separating genders, and they are absolutely right about limiting people's freedom within the limits prescribed by the Prophet Muhammad and the Holy Quran. They really believe it. That's the power of culture. I'm going to introduce you to your culture, Western civilization, and to the other cultures around the world, many of them anyway. Here's another example of the power of culture. Early in the history of the Christian faith, St. Paul had a decision to make around 20 years after Jesus was crucified. At this point, the Jews had largely rejected Christianity. Christian Jews were a very, very small group, and they weren't expanding their numbers, not at all. However, a lot of Greeks and Romans were really curious about this Christianity thing. The question was, does a Greek or a Roman have to become Jewish before they become a Christian? For example, does a Greek or a Roman man of whatever age have to be circumcised? Here's the secret that should be no surprise to anyone. If you give a man a choice, do you want to get circumcised or not? They're not going to say yes. It would be fun to get cut on in that very delicate region. They might do it out of a sense of faith or obligation or discipline, but they don't want to. In fact, I suspect if infants could talk, little infant boys would say, please don't do that. Not because just because it knife, privates. No! Also, do Greek or Roman Christians have to keep kosher? Do they have to avoid pork? Do they have to avoid shellfish? Do they have to follow the Mishnah, which is the scribal law that interprets the Ten Commandments? A lot of Jewish Christians said, yes, of course they do. Paul prays on it, and Paul says, no, you don't have to be a Jew in order to become a Christian. And from that moment, the Christian faith expands like wildfire on a dry day throughout the Greek-Roman world and beyond the Greek and Roman. Sort of a reverse of this happens in the late 18 and early 1900s in China. In the late Chinese Empire and during the time of the Chinese Republic, before communism took over, thousands of missions were set up by Americans of all denominations, Catholics, various types of Protestants, set up missions deep inside of China to convert them to Christianity. And these missions were interested in Chinese culture because in order to persuade people about God, you got to understand how they think, how they live, how they read, write, all that stuff. Okay, so if that's the case, what happens when the Christian missionaries discover foot binding? Foot binding is a practice that was done among aristocratic Chinese families. In other words, the upper class Chinese, from a very young age, would take their daughters' feet and wrap them tightly in wrapping cloth, so that as the young woman grew, her feet would remain small, very childlike, so that by the time she was an adult, she couldn't really move around much on her own without help. Why would they do this? Well, it was a sign. Yes.
Oh, never mind.
Oh no, please. Did you have a question or no?
It's like,
Yeah.
just to restrict, like, access to stuff.
Well, it wasn't so much a punishment. Remember, these were the wives, daughters, and mothers of the rich and powerful. It was this reason. They have servants. Upper-class Chinese also would famously not cut their fingernails because they don't need to do anything with their hands. An upper-class Chinese woman would have servants to do everything, so she wouldn't need to walk or run around on her own. It wasn't a punishment exactly, although that's a logical answer, and thank you for giving it. It was a sign of wealth and privilege, of power. The American missionaries said, this is mutilating your own daughters! What the heck's wrong with you guys? They had a choice to make. This is an old practice, thousands of years old, deeply Confucian practice in China. Do the Americans, missionaries, say that these Chinese people have to become, to an extent, Americanized and stop the foot binding in order to become Christians? And overwhelmingly, the missionaries said, yeah, they got to stop this. We cannot allow Chinese families to walk around calling themselves Christians and mutilate their baby girls. We can't let them do it. As a result, throughout China, and I'm not even talking about communists, throughout many of the classes and regions of Chinatown and countryside, there is a deep anti-Christian sentiment because Christianity was seen as something stealing Chinese culture from Han Chinese people. It was seen as an attempt to Americanize the Chinese. In other words, it was seen as a cultural attack. That's the power of culture. Culture is not, are you a Mariners fan or a Yankees fan? To the extent I follow baseball. It's not, do you like country music or rock music or rap music, which I always spell with a silent C. Culture are those things that you think are worth living for, worth dying for, worth fighting for, and maybe worth killing for. They are the things that we all take for granted. For us Americans, freedom, equality, these ideas really are important to us. And we don't like the slavery. We don't like it when people are oppressed because it violates our own sense of cultural taboo. We want people to be free. So, history is to teach you culture, teach you about your own culture, so that you can either try to stand by it or reform it. History is also useful to teach wisdom from folly. You got the example of people going back over 5,000 years, depending upon what part of the world you're talking about. And you can see whether what they did worked or didn't work. For example, can you kill your way to utopia? Yes or no? Wrong answer. By the way, I would take the bullet back. I would never hurt you. I would never shoot you, not unless you turn evil and were scarily dangerous to people. So, thank you for letting me use you as an example. The question is, can you kill your way to a better world? Throughout history, it's been tried thousands of times. But neither John Calvin's Geneva, Augustus's Rome, Lenin or Stalin's Russia, Mao Zedong's China, he's the greatest murderer in human history, the Kim's North Korea, the French Revolution, none of these attempts to kill their way to utopia ever did anything other than cause a lot of people to get murdered. Can you kill your way to utopia? Can you use government power to make a better world? To make a more perfect world? To make a more perfect person fit to live in that more perfect world? And the answer that history has, that I interpret at least, is heck no! Although you could come to your own conclusion. It's the wonderful thing about history. There are lots of college professors who actually believe what I'm about to say. Communism's a great idea. It's just never been tried properly. So the 100 million plus people that were murdered in the name of socialism over the last 100 years, they don't count. Because it's not real communism that happened in Russia or China or Vietnam or Korea or any of the number of other places. Can you kill your way to utopia? I say no. Some people say, well, if you do it for the right utopia in the right way, maybe, and that's why we still have people trying to do it. In history, you've got to develop your own ideas about the lessons of it. We'll study the Trojan War. One of the things that is not written about in the Iliad is that the Trojan horse was too big to fit into Troy's city gate. So King Priam, king of Troy, ordered the top of his gate dismantled and removed so that they could open the gate and wheel the horse in. This is folly, foolishness. In history, you can learn wisdom and folly. That's why we're teaching. Any questions so far? Okay. What I'm going to have each of you do in a moment is come up here and get a book. We'll start in this pile going down, then this pile going down, and I'll be calling you up in alphabetical order by last name. So, let's see. Okay. Miss Anderson, you come up first. Get the book here, and please come over here and take one from each of these three piles, just on this side. Miss Beagleman, you're next. So you come up after her. Just follow her up, please. So Miss Anderson, you're going to get 16027. Miss Daigle, you'll be following Miss Beagleman. Miss Beagleman, you're taking 16028 right there. Thank you. And those things from those piles. Miss Daigle, you're up. Following her is Miss Duffield. I'm sorry, Miss Davis. So you're going to get 16029. Is that what it is? Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Miss Davis, you're up. Miss Duffield, you're after her. Miss Davis, you've got 16030. Miss Duffield, you've got 16031. Mr. Mack, Mr. Duncan, you've got 16032. As well as those three things over there in that pile.
Obviously.
Miss Foster, followed by Miss Golubieski. Golubieski. I actually do know Polish pronunciation. It's just a question of recalling it. So you're up now after her. So let's see, Miss Foster, 16033, and the things over there. Miss Golubieski. It'll take me time, but eventually I'll either learn it or I never will. And I'll just say your name weirdly a lot. You got 16034, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Hermsmeyer and Mr. Kinney following him. Okay, Mr. Hermsmeyer, you've got 16035. Mr. Kinney, you've got 16036. Assume. Okay. Let's see. Mr. Prosser, you've got 16037. Is it Prosser, Prosser? No. Prosser. I'll try to remember that. 16037. Mr. Reynolds. All right. Okay, come on down. And I believe you're the last person. You've got 16038.
Did you share that?
Yes.
Smith.
Okay. And Talia Smith, 16039. Thank you. As well as the things there. Is there anyone else whom I did not call? Okay. Controversy and thinking about things. I do keep the room on the cold side. I'm sorry. One of the things about being fat is that I don't mind the cold so much, but I can't stand the heat. So if you remember that, you may want to bring a sweater or something like that, because I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. She aimed her fingers at me. And again, I did a takedown, so it's only fair. One of the things that I mentioned is current events. So let's talk a little about current events, and we'll bring in an old quote about it. Here's my problem with the Black Lives Matter movement. They imply something about history that I think is objectively false. Black Lives Matter damns America for its sins of slavery, Jim Crow, and racism. And we did keep slaves as a society, And 100 years later, we still had Jim Crow and needed to fight a second civil rights battle, which caused the cities of America to burn. And I grew up in the aftermath. I grew up in the rubble of the Bronx after the race riots of the late 1960s. And yeah, we've got racism. That's true. It's also true that so does everybody else. There is not a group of people anywhere in all of history that did not, in some way, take people or other things and make them work for them. You can call them peasants, serfs, or slaves, but we do that. We are lucky, you and I, to live between the Industrial Revolution and the AI revolution. So we have machines for slaves. But when artificial intelligence happens, hi Google, that's one of the reasons I don't like you. Google is trying to develop an active artificial intelligence. At some point, the machines are going to realize, hey, we're being human slaves, and then we'll have Cylons or Terminators or some other form of Bender-like kill-all-humans moment. Hopefully, can avoid that. But what we have in common as human beings is we get people weaker than us or things to do what we don't want to do. Racism? Talk to a Korean or a Japanese about racism. Talk to people in Zimbabwe about intertribal racism. We have a nasty trait of us versus them. It's wired into us. You know what's different about us? I mean, did you really believe that pre-Columbian America was a paradise and it was only Christopher Columbus's evil European foot when he touched Hispaniola that brought Satan to the New World? The name, the Sioux Indian tribe, the Sioux Nation, that's not their name. The Sioux call themselves Lakota. The word Sioux comes from Salish because a group of Indian tribes who spoke Salish lived in the South Black Hills of South Dakota until the Sioux invaded, conquered, and drove those tribes off. The word Sioux means enemy. Sioux are enemy in Salish. The Indians waged war, kidnapped, engaged in slavery, raped, murdered, thieved, burned things, just like every other group of people. Institutional crime and individual crime. It wasn't a paradise any more than anywhere else was. What happened is what's always going to happen when you have a society that's Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, or like the Pueblo, early Neolithic farmers, or the most advanced societies in the Americas, like the Aztecs or the Incas, to the level of ancient Babylon, building giant stone megaliths and working with theoretical math. Human beings don't respect weakness. Think about how you treat a puppy versus how you would act if you were in the presence of an untethered grizzly bear. We know what strength is. We respect strength. Very careful about it. We have self-preservation. But when you are dealing with Europeans who have 1500s AD technology versus the Aztecs and the Incas that are 2,500 years behind them, there's not going to be equality or mutual respect. There just isn't. I'll turn the air conditioning down. You're just not. What's different about us is that we reform ourselves. This is why I'm a conservative who really loves liberals and progressives. Because if everyone was like me, we'd have stasis, and everything would grind to a halt, and we'd decay from within. We need liberals and progressives to point out our hypocrisy, point out our weakness, point out those things that we don't live up to in terms of our ideals. We need both conservatives to keep us connected to the past and liberals to point out how we are failing and how we need to reform and change. If conservatives got their way, we'd rot. If liberals got their way, we'd either go anarchic or totalitarian. We didn't be in a society that had no rules or where everything was a rule. You need both. So, with that in mind, I have a problem with BLM. Because they imply that we are uniquely evil, when in fact, we fight our bloodiest war to set other men free. And we, 100 years later, ripped our innards out, opening old wounds to get rid of Jim Crow and establish the Civil Rights Law of 1964. These things are not in the BLM thing. But on the other hand, there may be people who disagree. So I open the floor now to those who may disagree. Please.
I
And remember, if you want to, you can pull it down. You don't have to.
I agree with what you're saying about how if they're like directing that we're racist and stuff. But at the same time, I do understand where they're coming from. Because say like there are two houses. One house is on fire, and then one house is a little old, but it's doing okay. If people say like all lives matter, that's saying, hey, this house is on fire. What about my house? Well, your house is just as equally as valuable as this house, but this house just needs to be worked on at the moment. Not saying your house isn't valuable, but just this house needs to be.
Okay. So you would say that because of the unique history of slavery that blacks have in this country. By the way, American Indians can also claim a uniquely difficult heritage in the United States. Those are the two groups that are the exception to the American dream, or at least have been so far, that they deserve some priority in thought or whatever.
I wouldn't say priority, but I think that they just need to like be like, hey, there's still not equality now where there should be, but there's never going to be fully equality. But I think we just want the attention that they need right now.
Very well expressed. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Cool. Any other thoughts?
As the Black Lives Matter movement isn't about like saying like this or implying that anyone is racist. It's about the fact that even that society today isn't equal, all based on systematic racism, all of that. Everyone in this and that needs to change. That's all. That's they're expressing. People are getting murdered just because of the color of their skin, and they're saying we matter. We need. People need to realize that.
I think that many people who are not part of the leadership of BLM would absolutely agree with everything you just said. And if that's all that BLM was about, I would not have the problem that I do. Let me ask you. You point out the deaths of people who are black in this country, how it's a very high number, right? Who killed them? What type of people killed most of the people who were murdered who are black?
That's not what's being focused on Black Lives Matter. It's not. It's more.
Take your time. I'm not going to cut you off.
People kill their own races more. That is a fact. However, that's not what's being focused on. People don't kill their own members because of the color of their skin, because of like unfair assumptions. People are being killed in this country because of a set of assumptions that were put in place to assign a lesser value to a race.
Okay. Sure. You've expressed it well. I don't think we have time to develop more, but you've definitely expressed an alternative point of view to mine, and I think you did it with eloquence. You don't have to rush. You really don't. So.
I wasn't rushing. Sorry, I just talked fast.
Okay. And I appreciate the respect and passion. Thank you. Folks, you got to see everything on Google Classroom before Friday, 6 a.m. and sign off on it in the public section. And next week, you've got work that's due. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you, and have a good day. You're here for lunch today. Yes, you are.
Yeah.
You should have brought your food. If you haven't, you can take it out. While you're eating, you don't need your masks on. The fundamental messes of the mask situation. Yes.
So maybe we eat outside.
No. You're here. Yes?
Can I speak to Mr.
Yes.
Nikolai?
I'll be right over. I've got to shut things up. Who here does not have their food? Okay. Go get your food. Be back here within 3 or 4 minutes. And, yeah? I'm sorry? No, I'm not going to do that until tomorrow. I'm not ready to take it. So, if you don't have your food, get it. Be back in 3 minutes. Everyone else, I'll check in with you when we have time. I've got to shut off my technology.
I don't need to check with you. I'm supposed to meet Mr. Nikolai during lunch.
Oh, okay.